This is my binder full of my CRNA school application things. You gotta keep yourself organized. Oh, I have things I wrote down from my interviews and how I was studying, all my certs, PALs, gosh, recommendations. Oh, my CCRN passing thing. Here it is, y'all. It's the resume video. Finally, the resume video. You guys have been so patient waiting for this video, so I'm just gonna get right into it. I made my resume years ago when I was in college. I had a course that they required us to make one, and I have just been since then updating it and keeping up with it so that at any given notice I could just hand it to somebody and it'll be updated, or at any given moment I could just say, okay, I'll email this to you and get it right to you. To me, what a resume is a piece of paper where you get to brag about yourself. I call it humbly bragging. If I could cross out the word resume in it, I would say humbly bragging down below. It is space where you can tell whoever is reading it everything that you have done to qualify you for whatever job or position you are seeking. Tell them about where you went to school, what classes you have taken, your GPA, where you live, your phone number, because putting your address in there is very important. But anyways, we'll get there. Tell them about computer programs that you're comfortable with, charting systems that you have used, protocols, different devices, any volunteer work you have done, internships, everything like that. I'll just quickly go over the sections that I have on, like, literally I'm reading right off of my resume. I have my education, obviously your experience, my licensure and my certifications, leadership experience, any honors that I earned, and we'll go through that, my volunteer experience, computer skills, and then at the bottom I have my references. I think I'm just going to be doing little screenshots and talking my way through it. Hopefully you guys can follow along, and definitely ask me any questions that you have down below in the comment section. So here we go. Here's a quick slide through of the header of my resume. Pause it here to take a closer look at it. This is probably going to be super dry and turning into an online module, but I hope it's helpful. The layout of my resume is very simple, just black and white. My name's bolded, but everything that's important, every heading is bolded. Don't go bolding random words that you think are important, just the headings at the beginning and that are at the top of certain sections. Now, you also want to spell out every word. Don't assume that the person reading your resume knows where you came from, knows what this acronym means. Spell out everything. So I went to Virginia Commonwealth University. Yes, it's usually VCU, but I spelled it out. It was in Richmond, and I put down my GPA, the degrees that I earned, and below that, the Centera Critical Care Internship. That was an educational opportunity that my hospital gave to us, so I included that there as well. I don't know what other information people typically put there, but that's all I put on mine was the GPA, the degrees that I earned, where I went to school, and that was pretty much it. Obviously, that's not my real name or my real address. I used this resume to apply to CRNA school, so the address didn't really matter. They knew that I would relocate to go to CRNA school. However, if you are applying for a highly sought local position that there's so many applicants, just weigh whether or not you want to put an out-of-town address on your resume, because they might look at it and say, oh, well, we don't want her to have to relocate, or that might be a hassle. So just think about that before you're putting an out-of-town address on your resume. The next section that I had on my resume is experience. This is what took up the bulk of my resume. And when I was a fresh little nursling, this is what the top of my experience section looked like. It just had my nursing internship on it, where I worked as a care partner, and then where I went to nursing school. But how most people do their resumes is putting their experience in reverse chronological order. So as you get more experience, you add those closer to the top and just keep stacking as you go. So this is what the top of my experience section now looks like. And below it is what I just had on the screen before. You guys can go back and take a look at it. So here we're getting to the little tedious things that a lot of people tend to overlook. And I know that we don't care what's bolded and there's a comma here, there's a comma there. But I've looked at resumes before, and I honestly won't take you seriously if you have different headings looking different type of ways, dates in different orders, and if different sections look completely opposite of the section prior to it. I have bolded my position, which for this was a registered nurse. I have bolded where I worked, and then the location is not bolded. The unit that I worked on, bolded. And then in parentheses, I have the month and the year that I started working on the unit or wherever I worked, dash the month and the year that I stopped working. And for this case, I was still working at the present time, so I put the word present. And note that there's a comma between each position, where I worked, the definitely the city and the state. And I know that earlier I told you guys to avoid using acronyms. I was saying that mostly for non-medical people that are looking at this video. But even for medical people, be very careful about the acronyms. Only use them for common things such as the ICU, which means the intensive care unit. Even as we get into the next section, you'll see that I use acronyms, but that is also because this resume was going to highly skilled professionals in the nursing industry. I would assume, and I actually did assume, that they knew what an LVAD or a TAVR was. But then you can also see that I still spelled out the word cardiac bypass and didn't put CABG or cabbage as we typically call them. So now this is where everyone's resume will differ depending on what floor you worked, or if you worked at a marketing job, or if you were a teacher, or if you were an accountant, or if you work in the FBI. What you put here and the sentences that you form have to describe what you actually did. Because if you're in an interview, they usually will pull up your resume and start asking you questions about it. So don't put something down that you have not done. And there are some differences between a new nurse putting certain things down on the resume and a nurse that has been working and is transferring to another unit or going on to pursue a graduate degree. And I will touch on those differences for the new grads when I get to the second section of my experience in just one moment. But if there's one thing that I would tell anybody asking about how to make a resume, it is that you need to pay close attention to your adjectives and the verbs that you use throughout the body of your resume. In red, you will see that there are no repeated verbs or adjectives within the body of the sentences that I put down on that paper. There is nothing wrong with popping open a thesaurus. Well, no one has a thesaurus anymore. Just Google it and use different words. Just like writing a paper, you don't want every sentence to start with the. You don't want anything to start with but or and. That is the same type of thing and thinking when it comes to writing your resume. No, there are no hard and fast rules to the tenses that you use, but what I did and what made sense to me is to write everything that I did in the past in past tense, and the job that I was working at presently I wrote in the present tense. I also chose to leave out periods at the end of my sentences just because I was using bullets. And you may ask, why is your resume so damn long? I found it very important to efficiently, humbly brag about myself. So my experience section, I think, is what took up the most space in my resume. But you know what? I want y'all to know everything that I did and what I know so that there's no question like, oh, that girl has seen a lot of things. I want to hear what she has to say about herself and what she has learned. So that is the reason. I know people probably frown against it, but I don't know. I just decided I was going to throw it all on a page. A good place to start for anybody who has some experience on the floor is to start with the nursing process. So assessment, diagnosis, planning, implementation, and evaluation. So point out the things to you that you thought were hard when you started to learn how to do them. Point out the different devices that you used, the drips that you titrated. Point out that you are a good team member and that you work well with the care team that provides care to your unit or your floor. And as you can see, the vascular ICU step-down experience that I had was the top of my experience when I was applying to my ICU position. Hopefully, while I've been rambling and these things have been paused on the screen, you guys are jotting down some notes and things that you could use on your resume. My little nurselings. This is what the top of my resume looked like when I first graduated and was applying to a new nursing job. So again, pause it just to see exactly what I wrote down. Don't copy it verbatim because it might be different than what you did. My nurse residency was essentially an internship at the VA hospital, so I just put some things down that I did there. I was a care partner at a hospital in Richmond. I put my time as a student nurse down there just so you can see what college I went to and the hours and the rotations that I had. When these were the only things on my resume, I definitely added some more bullets and talked a little bit more in depth about what I did, or maybe separated some of the sentences. But as you grow older and you get more experience, you just trim down the things that you don't really need. And when I put down my clinical units, obviously that is not all of them. I just picked down the ones that I felt were most impactful. Most of them were ICUs or the PACU. I knew how many hours that we had by the time I graduated, so I put that down as well. We used a tracking system called Typhon. I was hunting for this and I found it in my email. This is some of the first things that I put in my resume. I worked at Nordstrom and I also worked for the census as an enumerator. Really, really good job for anybody in college or anybody actually who wants to work for the census. You make very good money to walk around and ask people to do their census who didn't. So look in my Nordstrom section. Yes, the format is different, but this is a different resume then. I talk about, how much I sold, what I did in assisting customers, and making sure that everyone's satisfied, and I put that in words on my resume. Another good descriptor is when you use numbers to tell somebody how much work that you have done. So you can see that I put $8,000. I think I probably sold way more than that, and then down below in the census, I talked about how many cases that I helped with. The last few minutes of this video, I'm just going to quickly talk about the other sections that I included on my resume. So this video actually turned out to be too long, so I cut it in half. I'll be releasing the last part of this video sometime this week. Thanks for watching, guys.